Good morning. My name is Bob Perino. I'm the chair of the FMA Board of Trustees this year. I'd like to welcome you to the October 2025 Doctoral Student Consortium. The FMA hosts these consortia with a number of conferences throughout the year to further its mission of reaching out to, engaging, and facilitating the development of emerging scholars. The association hopes that this activity will give you the opportunity to create network with exceptional faculty, with peers of yours that will last, develop relationships that will last for many years to come. And I'll comment a little bit more on that in a couple of moments. There's a very talented group of people here today. Among the students, 44 people were chosen to participate in this consortium from 126 applications. The faculty, it goes without saying, were asked to participate based upon their exceptional records, and Mike Weisbach is going to introduce them in a couple of minutes. We realize that the next few days are going to be very busy for many of you. You're interviewing for jobs, you're presenting papers, today you're participating in the activities specific to the consortium. But we encourage you, in the time that you have beyond that, to get out and network and take advantage of the relationship building activities, as well as the research skill building activities that are facilitated by the FMA. Jared Hartford's done a spectacular job of putting together a program this year, and we hope you get as much as you can from it. Now, the program today was put together by Mike Weisbach. Many of you, I think, have already met Mike, but Mike is the Ralph W. Kurtz Chair in Finance, as well as an NBER associate. He's the Kurtz Chair at, I should say, Ohio State University. He previously taught at the University of Rochester, Arizona, Illinois, and at Ohio State, as well as the University of Chicago. He's taught for them also. Mike is past editor of RFS. He's been associate editor of 5 other journals over the years. His primary areas of interest in over the long term in research have been corporate finance, corporate governance, and private equity. If you look at the numbers in his syllabus, in his bio, which I'm sure you all have, you'll see he's been extraordinarily successful. He's published at least 48 refereed papers. He's got about 50,000 Google sites. His papers have been downloaded from SSRN 90,000 times plus. These are really exceptional numbers. One thing that you don't see in his bio is the commitment that Mike has demonstrated towards the development of young scholars throughout his career. And I can tell you this from firsthand experience, because I first met Mike in July, and you guys may cringe at this, July 1988, which is 37 years ago, when I quit my industry job and went back to the University of Rochester to get a PhD. And Mike was finishing up his first year as an assistant professor there. I might point out the next year, Neil Pearson was there. And both of them ended up being on my dissertation committee at that time. But over the last 37 years, getting back to Mike, I've gotten together with Mike on a regular basis to talk about our families, to talk about the research we're doing and the profession in general. And one of the things that struck me over the course of all this time is that every time I meet with Mike, he makes a point of telling me about the students he's working with right then and there. He makes a point about telling me what's going on with the students that he told me about last time, how they're doing in their careers, what research they're doing, how things are going in the promotion and tenure process, that sort of thing. And he's also will often talk about other less junior but still relatively junior academic researchers that he's been working with. And so he's he's always very enthusiastic about working with these sorts of, students as well as junior faculty. And if you look at the co-authors that he's had on these 48 papers that are listed in his bio, you'll get an appreciation for the breadth of people that he works with. This morning, I noticed that Mike had a copy of his book. If you guys haven't seen this book, it's called The Economist's Craft. And he wrote it about, a decade ago?
No, 5 years.
5 years ago, okay. Seems like a decade. 5 years ago, basically to outline a number of things that are very important in success in our profession. Selecting a research topic, writing a draft, presenting the paper, accumulating feedback, incorporating it into the paper, and so on and so forth. This is basically a book on how to publish from someone who's been very successful at it, and I'm sure you'll find it useful. Those of you, especially that are at the dissertation stage, and which I think is just about all of you, you might find this to be very, very helpful. But I wanted to bring it up not so much to pitch his book, as to sort of demonstrate that this is what he does in his spare time when he's not publishing papers. Okay, he loves to work with junior folks. So if you get a chance and you've not met him, I encourage you to do so. And as well, all of the other faculty who are here today. You'll certainly be working in groups with one faculty member over the course of the day. Make sure you meet everyone, because these are people who have demonstrated that they're interested in your future and helping you be successful in the profession. You should take advantage of it. But with that, I'm going to turn everything over to Mike, who's going to introduce the other faculty and get your session underway. Thank you very much.
Oh, well, thanks. With an introduction like that, I don't know what to say. But thanks a lot. Really appreciate it, Bob. Bob's a terrific guy, and I've known him for a long time. So anyway, so thanks. I got a call last spring from Jared Harford, who's now the president of the AFA, and he asked me to run this program, and I've been sitting on this panel every few years myself, and so I thought about it. I said, sure, why not? Happy to do it. And then the first thing I had to do was to find 6 people to be on the panel, and I have no idea who to pick. And then the next thing, I get an email from this guy, Yuri, who says, I've done it before, can I do it again? I said, yeah, that sounds good. Now I only have to find 5 people. Yuri actually is a professor at Arizona State, and a lot of his papers are with his wife. Is Alana here too? No, she's not here, but I seem to meet her at every conference I go to except for this one. And they've done very nice papers on basically all areas of corporate finance, a little theory, a little practice and stuff. And then I had to pick 5 people, and I thought, well, I got lots of co-authors. Let's see which ones I can tap. And I knew that one of the things that happens at a meeting like this is that you guys are from all different fields of finance, and we each have our own little specialty. So I tried to find people I knew well who were didn't do exactly what I did, so that they would be better matched with you for your skills. And so first thing I thought of was Neil Pearson, the bald guy at the end over there. He is a professor at Illinois, and I've known him actually longer than I've known Bob, because we were actually students together, and then we were colleagues at Rochester, and then at one point he convinced the people at Illinois, I don't know how he did it, that they should hire me when I was at Arizona, and I was his colleague there for 9 years, and so I've known him forever. When I had my first kid, the shower was at his house, the kid is 34 years old now, so that was a while ago. And anyway, so Neil and I actually wrote one paper together. Most of his work is on, I would say, derivatives, structured products, various stuff like that. But he did write one paper with me on mutual funds. He didn't think that I wrote anything on mutual funds, or that he wrote it, but we did one together. And 2 other co-authors are up there. Jean Bena is an expert on patents and intellectual property, and among other things. And I have a paper you may have seen with a former student, Daisy Wong, who is not here today because she's just took a job. And so Jan is a professor at UBC, so I figured, get somebody from the local place, he doesn't even have to fly here, so he'll say yes, and he did, so that's good. So happy to have you, Jan. And then the other co-author is Sophie Shive, and this is a paper that has not been circulated yet, although she keeps telling us we should post it. It's on something called continuation funds. In the private equity world, it's the hottest thing right now. So at some point in the next month or two, there will be something on SSRN with her name and my name together with several other names as well on how continuation funds work. And then Vivian Fang has a very interesting background because she was actually in accounting, and she saw the light and switched to finance. And so if any of you have any work related sort of on the border between accounting and finance, I thought she would be a really good person. And she has a really, we talk about, issues you've had to deal with in her life. I mean, she was a student at Tulane. Now, keep in mind, Tulane is in New Orleans when Hurricane Katrina destroyed the city, literally. And so she had to go around the country finding substitute PhD advisors, and she ended up at University of Michigan, and it's a long saga. And so it just means that she's a very tough, hard person, and she's had a great career, and she's moved from Rutgers to Minnesota, and now she's at Indiana, and so that's great. And finally, I figured I had to...
Finally, you go to the bottom of the barrel.
Yes, right. Yeah.
Found something.
I had to have, I wanted to just pick I have great colleagues at Ohio State, and I want to just pick everybody from Ohio State, but I didn't think that was a good idea. But I figured I could have one person from Ohio State. And so I got Zahi Ben David. I hope you've read his papers. So as you know, Zahi, he's a very big defender of the traditional views in finance. So he believes in the efficient markets You're laughing. Good, you're laughing. That means you know what his papers are about, because he is what's the word, iconoclast, or he likes to challenge the accepted wisdom. So so we often I remember once at the lunch table, there was a debate on whether the Chinese stock market was overvalued, and Lu Zhang was like, okay, no, nothing can ever be overvalued because the prices are always right. And Zahi's like, oh, come on, it's like triple what it should be. And who won the bet, Zahi, was it?
I actually don't know. What happened in the last 5 years?
Anyway, so that's kind of the panelists. And so the way today will work is that 3 of them will talk to you in the morning, and then in the first session, and then we'll have a break, and then 3 of them will also talk to you after that. And if there's any time at the end, I might say a few words. And I just thought maybe I'd say a few words at the beginning before I turn it over to the panelists. And I know, it's a very stressful time of life for you. And I was saying, I got a chance to chat with some of you before this, and we were saying that, if you had been on the market last year or the year before, it would have been a very stressful time in your life. But this year, there's all these extra stuff going on, and then, and I'll be, you won't be surprised to know that at our table, the word H-1B came up. Normally, that doesn't come up in random conversations, but lately it has. And it adds an extra element of stress. There was a recent rule change that will help many of you, and I don't want to talk about that. But I will say that once the craziness with all the visas and stuff started, like in the spring and the summer, I was away, and I came back, and I immediately grabbed all our students, and I took them to lunch. I was doing a little talk. So look, one of the things you have to realize is that there's ups and downs in the profession, and you're all young. Hopefully you'll be doing this for the next 30 or 40 years. There's going to be good times and bad times, tough times and bad times. What you really want to remember is that when things are getting harder, you have to just buckle down and don't obsess about the craziness in the world. Just try and focus on how you can make your work better. Okay? So whenever there's crazy news, say, okay, I'm not going to obsess about this. I'm going to figure out how to make my tables look better. I'm going to figure out how to make my econometrics better. I'm going to rewrite my introduction for the 42nd time. You're going to really focus on, think about how to make your paper more impactful. How can you take a little topic and make it bigger and make it of interest to more people. Think about all the things you can do, and whenever things get harder, just think about making your work better. Okay, remember, one of the things we talk about in finance a lot is sort of seeing the signal through all the noise, right? So is the price right or is it not right? And, we'll never agree on that. But one of the things you should think about, I talk about it in the book a little bit, is to think about your career the same way we think about markets, right? So that, and I just take a step back and think about what the fundamentals are, okay? The fundamentals are you're studying finance, okay? One of the things that we have learned through our literature is just how important financial markets are, right? It's important for the development of countries. Countries without financial markets don't develop, okay? It's important for the development of companies, right? Think about all the new companies. Like every company that you deal with on a day-to-day basis might have been developed in your lifetime, but was developed in my lifetime. You have Amazon and Apple and all your favorite companies were new companies started by our financial system, right? Talk about the investments of your endowments and all the companies you're going to work for. All that is dependent on finance. And so therefore, first of all, we're studying a really important subject. And the other thing is that everyone wants to know about it. So literally another topic that came up at the breakfast table was the fact that the reporters are all calling us and we don't quite know what to say. And the reason why they're calling us and not our friends in the English department is because they want to hear what we have to say, because people in the real world really care about what we say. And what you guys are doing is you're developing human capital on a really important subject. And another fact to remember, and this has maybe to do with Vivian's switch from accounting to finance, is that the students are all majoring in finance and not accounting anymore. Well, why? Because they actually want to learn something that's useful in their life. And so that despite all the really crazy stuff going on in the world, students are flocking to finance departments. And so at the end of the day, what determines the demand for our services, and especially your services, is the fact that students want to take our classes, and they do, okay? So just when you're getting frustrated about the market, and believe me, you will, okay? There will be days when you're banging your head against the phone, waiting I guess the phones don't ring anymore, it's now emails, but it's very frustrating, it's very depressing. So just remember what you're doing is fundamentally important, and you're developing knowledge in a very important subject that lots of people care about, and that there are lots of people who want to learn from you, not just in the US, but around the world. I was just in Shanghai, and the people there, they're just desperate to learn finance, right? People in Singapore, desperate to learn, all over Europe, everywhere around the world, people want to learn finance. Why? Because it's important. Anyway, so that's all I have to say for now, and what I will do at the very end is, if I can think, what's going to happen, of course, is that the 6 of them are going to say everything I could possibly have said, and I won't have anything left to say, but if there's any, I might say a few words at the very end. But I thought I'd turn it over, and we'll have I asked the 3 younger faculty to talk first, and then we'll have a break, and then the 3, well, not older, but sort of slightly older faculty will do it. So, Yuri, were you going to go first?
Good morning, everyone. I feel obligated to say a couple words about Michael Weisbach, and I didn't prepare anything, but here's, I know Mike back from Arizona, and the story goes that 15 years ago we decided with my colleague, with Oliver Bogut, we decided to make a conference that's been running now for many years, and we had to find somebody to advise us on where to find money, how to organize. And I remember that we searched kind of all around, and we eventually came to Mike and started asking him for advice. So why is it, and that's how he came to our conference, he helped us to start. And bigger point out of this is that in our profession, we somehow always rely on just couple senior, influential people who are always there when you need help. And I know, like I have my neighbor in the office, Hank Bessenbinder, I usually talk to Gordon Phillips, and those people, you would think that they're editors, they write a lot of papers, they're very busy with their lives and families. You would think that those are the last people who would respond to you, but you write an email to Gordon or to Mike, and you know that in 2 hours you will hear back with something useful. So that's, since I'm giving a lot of useless advices today, that's one big advice is that don't think that you have to reach to somebody like who is free and available. It's just there are a couple people who are cornerstone, and Mike is one of them. I'm speaking from the heart. Okay, so now I did this lecture for a couple events, and I figured out no free trial. And I figured out that when we meet specifically with job market candidates or consortium like what we do today, people are just way too stressed to hear about my research and about some similar topics. They're not, specifically since I write models, nobody wants to know anything about this within 15 minutes, and it would be useless. And I eventually, at some point, I thought about just talking about teaching. The funny thing about teaching is that I should be kind of the last person to teach you how to teach, because I failed completely in my first year. I started in Hong Kong, and it was a really disaster in the first year. And then it kind of went better, and eventually it was okay, and then it was very good. So I kind of focused, based on this, I just focused on kind of what was wrong and how to fix it, because apparently you don't need to kind of to do anything extraordinary, just particular misconceptions and mistakes that people do over and over. And my senior colleagues, where I started in Hong Kong and then in Baconia, for example, they told me about those mistakes, and they were right, and I'm telling this to you. So what are the most common misconceptions, mistakes, and funny enough, tricks that you need to learn so that you kind of survive in your first year? You will see how difficult this is with some exceptions. So there are, first of all, some misconceptions that students keep asking me about when they start teaching. One of them is language. So I hear a lot that you need to be a native speaker to teach well and to present well. Now, when I start looking, like I remember when I was a PhD student at high school in Berkeley, at some point, Thierry Adin, who was like for 1 year, who was a PhD advisor, he said like, anyway, so do we have any foreigners in the program? Because it was a meeting some. And we just looked at him, and then he realized that out of all people who were in PhD in finance and PhD in real estate, there was not a single American at the time. They were all from China, from Soviet Union, from all possible places. But anyway, so there is a correlation, but it's really not so important. You don't need to be perfectly clear, and we'll just get to the point what is important in a moment. The other misconception is about type of classes. Especially when we hire a new person for the department, the so-called rookie, the assistant professor would try to stay away from like master's program or PhD classes. I found that there are no right or wrong classes that you need to teach. For example, you can teach PhD classes and you teach about like your area of research. You can teach master's classes, and maybe you're technically inclined and you'll teach them, say, MATLAB or Python or something that's useful. Or you teach undergrads and then you teach some core classes. It's just a different way to go, and I tried different classes and eventually they all work. And perhaps another misconception is the difficulty of classes. Over and over, I hear that the new professors start and they want to teach as simple as possible. And they kind of water down the class to almost nothing. And they try to give good grades. So this seems like a win-win situation, but in the end it backfires, because there is some kind of curve that when you pass a particular point, students become unhappy because your class is so simple, your dean becomes unhappy because your grades are too good. So this is not also a path to go down. Okay. So if I can summarize, what's important and what works very well? I would say, from looking back at my mistakes, number one thing is organization. There is nothing more important, because you think about yourself as a teacher when you start on your own class. I know most of you were teaching something, but you did not teach the full class from the beginning to the end with full responsibility. Number one thing is organization. There are so many things you need to remember. You need to remember you write exams, on time. You have to have your syllabus a couple months before. You have to make sure your website is running. You have to make sure that students can register for class. You have to check how many seats in your class, and then what kind of textbook. Can students buy textbook in a bookstore, or can they download the textbook? Did you ask for the notes? Have you been sitting in some other classes to figure out what lectures are? Did you ask the previous professor about what they were teaching, like in the previous class in the lower level? So did you hire a teaching assistant if there is teaching assistant? Do you know who will be grading? And so on, and so on, and so on, and so on. All of these things, it all has to be on time. Students absolutely hate when professor is missing something. Just maybe it's something not perfect, but it has to be organized. So speaking of which, the other side of this is consistency. So it would be, you will see, it would be very tempting when something goes wrong. Like some students start complaining, class is too difficult, too mathematical, like too much homework. It's very tempting to you've done it before, but it's very tempting to just remove stuff and go back and say, okay, well, you complain about this grade, let me give you a better grade. It's always wrong because students at some point understand that you're not firmly following your procedure. And once you give a better grade, next thing what you have instead of 2 people, you have 7 people who show up next time, and all of them want to change the grade. Okay? So what works? One thing is, and probably the most important thing, is to make class interesting. And the way, in my opinion, to make class interesting, first of all, you have to make it interesting for yourself. Otherwise, if you're not interested in what you're talking about, then it's not going to be interesting for students. So you talk about some particular topic, tie it up with your research. Make some example. Look up something on the internet. What are the news? You talk about, say, interest rates. Look up at what's going on with interest rates. How are interest rates different across the world? What are yield curves? Talk to them about this news. Because you just looked at it, you're interested, and you want to tell the students. If you're not interested, they're not interested either. Introduce some small things, like that's what teachers do a lot. Introduce some games, lotteries or whatever. Students recently asked for some AI assignment, or they ask actually whether they can use AI because they do everywhere. One way to go is just prohibit everything. The other way to approach it is just to let them use AI somewhere. It's like, with children, if you have kids, they always want to play some computer game. You can prohibit it many times, but it's better idea to just like, okay, here's 30 minutes, you can play. But they have some way to do it. Okay, so I remember when I started, it was actually a great idea. The senior professor came and introduced some kind of teaching techniques. And I remember one hint from this professor. I don't even remember who it was exactly, but I remember one hint that actually was really cool. They are informally called hooks, okay? So let me explain. For example, I teach classes, my current class is about equity issuance and repurchases and everything. And I start talking about IPO. I don't start class by just overview and everything. I start my class by presenting some fact without an answer. I'll say, look, IPOs, for example, in Hong Kong and many other countries, produce 18% return in just a single day on the opening day. So at this rate, you become a billionaire by the end of the year. And since many of us invested, like who worked in China or Hong Kong, since many of us invested in IPO, we know that it's not possible. And there is a problem. There is adverse selection. You get fewer shares in the end if the IPO is a popular one. And you get more shares if the IPO is a failure. But you don't tell the students, you just tell them the question, then you get to the IPO, and then eventually you ask for their opinion, and you explain to them what was going on. So that's a hook, because it kind of creates connection between the beginning of the lecture when you introduce something and the end of the lecture. The other interesting thing that the professor suggested, suppose you teach technical class. You teach technical class, the students would be, some of them would be unhappy somewhere in the middle. What do? You start the first class with the most horrible equations that you can find. Start with like ordinary differential equation, general solution. And just boringly talk about this equation for 30 minutes. I can guarantee you that by the second class, you will not have like 5 students that were sitting on the back. because they would say like, I'm not doing it for a semester. So that's one. I mean, it's not always a perfect one, but it works. And always ask for feedback. That's another thing that came out of this advice. You might have noticed that when you like fly with airlines, for example, an airline was late usually, you get an email saying that, do you want to share your feedback? We're very sorry. You understand that they're not interested in your feedback. They don't read it. They don't care if you clicked I'm happy or unhappy. This is for you to feel that you responded to the situation, and that's kind of pretty much what's going on with classes. 7 deadly things when you teach. Never run the class late. When you are a professor, when you teach, it always seems like what's wrong? It's another 5 minutes, and we're gonna teach. We're gonna finish this wonderful example from the other side. Remember yourself being a student. The professor runs it 10 minutes later. You already imagine yourself drinking coffee somewhere. No, like this is the end, and you will continue next time, no matter what. Second, give the notes. Once you give notes or you post the notes, always, they usually don't take any notes. They don't write. I make them write everything. I saw people teaching without any notes, especially PhD classes. I was PhD director for a long time. They come to the board, they think like, what's wrong? I'll tell them about my paper. I wrote several of these papers. I can explain it to them. They come with their own published like Journal of Finance paper, and they start scribbling on the board. They cannot explain anything. You have to have notes in your hand. You have to know like what you will say. It's a matter of organization. Do not ignore questions. If somebody is asking, just respond or say that I will respond later. It's about your presentations as well. Get students involved. So they quietly sit. Make sure that you start. They at least need to know that there is some kind of randomness in this game. The professor can ask you. The professor can go to the back of the, like I would always go to the back of the audience and say like, there is a reason why the students sit on the very back. And I'll give them some assignment to do, and I'll see how they're solving it. It helps a lot. So I saw people canceling classes, never goes too well. I knew personally 2 people who eventually lost their jobs because they were persistently either canceling classes, going somewhere, or giving it to a teaching assistant to teach, and they'd say like, what's wrong with this? Nobody would even know. But like you can do it maybe once in a very while when it's necessary, but if you do it all the time, it's wrong. Anyway, I'm probably running out of time. Do not run your class late. I'm running my presentation late. Bad apples, okay, 5 more minutes. Bad apple situations. I heard from many people the same story, and you might see it too. The class, you teach class several times, it always goes well. One particular semester, you teach the same class, like core class. Out of 200 people in a class, there are 2 people who sit next to each other and they become unhappy. Why they're unhappy, we don't know. They just talk to each other and they say like, well, this is just too much mathematics, or no, this is not what we need for our next degree, or anything, or professor does not give perfect grade. And I noticed that these people, it happens like once every 3 years or so, and those people start talking to everyone, and eventually it becomes a bigger problem. When you see those people, talk to them. Just figure out what they want. Don't give them many concessions because they will ask for more. But figure out what they want because it gets bad very, 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 very quickly. Always check with the faculty who were teaching the class before you teach. Check for coordination. I noticed that people teach the same thing. There was one set of materials, and this material is exactly repeated in the next class. Okay. Regrades is a very difficult question. So you have to have very particular policy that will require some experience to understand when to change grades or not. Okay, almost done. So a couple more things. You will run into question how much time to allocate to teaching and how much time to allocate to research. The way I think about this, looking back at when I was a PhD student, I'm thinking about to get to graduate school, and most of you are internationals, to get to graduate school, you need to pass some kind of GRE test, right? Or similar, or GMAT, but you also need to pass TOEFL, or some English test. So this English test is just like barrier. So you have to score minimum amount on this test. But for other tests, maybe they're important, grades and tests. So your research is important, but you have to keep a minimum, at least some minimum acceptable level for your teaching as well. But if you can do it better, then it's even better. spend a lot of time on your first class. That's what many people don't do. I know you want to publish a job market paper, but spend a lot of time first semester, because that's an investment that will work for you in the next couple years. Try to teach this class as a TA, and most of these problems that I talked about can be avoided if you just simply organized, if you take necessary steps. It's not so difficult in the end, just a matter of being prepared. Okay, thank you.
Just remember, one of the things we do wrong in graduate school is we spend so much time teaching you guys how to do research, and then we throw you into the classroom with like zero instruction, and then we're surprised when you all don't do great, right? And so it's really good to hear that from Yuri about how, because remember, once you get a job, it's a lot harder, because you'll instead of doing one class where they hand you the notes, they'll say, okay, you're teaching investments next semester. What book do you want to use? And go ahead, right? And it's like, oh my God, what do I do? So anyway, so think about what Yuri said. Anyway, who's next?
Hi, I'm Vivian. Most of you probably don't know me because I just made the switch from accounting to finance about 2 years ago. Now, before we all came, Mike emailed everybody and commented that young people these days don't know how to speak without slides. So I brought slides just to prove his point. So today I'm going to speak on this topic, somewhat unorthodox, working through adversity and building a research network from zero. Now, I feel like I'm well positioned to speak on this topic because my academic career began with a lot of chaos. And along the way, I learned a few lessons I thought might be worth sharing with you. Just a little bit of background here. I did my PhD at Tulane in New Orleans, and it was full of surprises. 2 years in, Hurricane Katrina hit, which flooded the campus and shut down the entire city. So I ended up going to Michigan to visit the accounting department where a college friend had just started her finance PhD. And many faculty members and fellow classmates left Tulane for good during that time. Now, after that, I got a full-time job at Deloitte Tax in Detroit downtown. So I was doing tax returns during the day, but still tried to work on my dissertation and my first paper on stock market liquidity after hours. But to be honest, I had very little hope that I could actually finish my PhD. But somehow, by some miracle, that my first paper got into JFE within 4 months. And I graduated with publication. But I still had to go back to Tulane for 2 semesters to teach, which was a requirement. And on the day of defense, Hurricane Gustav made landfall. And we were at the mandatory evacuation. We moved my dissertation defense to 7 a.m. in the morning, and I evacuated right after. I didn't go back to Tulane until a decade later, for good reason, because I didn't want to bring more hurricanes to the city. Then I had to get a job, and it was 2008. During the middle of a financial crisis, I applied to a few industry jobs available where I thought I may have more advantage. I didn't get any. And I applied to one academic position, and I got a job. And I'm very grateful, till today, to Rutgers for giving me my first academic job. Now, most of you probably will not have such a dramatic beginning to your career. I hope you don't. But I will still say that adversity is inevitable in an academic career. After all, doing research is hard. It takes time, it takes patience, and an oddly high tolerance for criticism and rejection. And when you do encounter adversity, perspective matters a lot. Okay? You will spend some of the best years of your life doing this, so make sure that this is something you truly enjoy. And when you're sure about that, then adversity starts to feel different, less like suffering and more like training. And when you're in the times of adversity, make the best of it, but do search carefully for your own direction and the research topics that truly excite you. Now, I signed up for an accounting PhD program because it was just the natural path. I had my undergraduate and my master's degrees both in accounting, so I didn't think otherwise. But when I was working on my dissertation, I started to realize that the traditional accounting topics just weren't where my curiosity was anymore. And my research on liquidity started taking shape. So I made a conscious decision after graduation to shift all of my energy towards my liquidity research and basically stopped working on my dissertation. Now, looking back, that was probably one of the best career decisions I made. It was probably not the decision or advice you would get from your advisor, but my advisor was in Oxford already. So sometimes, to me, at least to me, working through adversity is not just about persistence or resilience. It also means self-awareness, kind of know who you are, what your goal is, what drives you, and know when to persist and when to let go. Now, one of the most beautiful and almost comforting things about academia is that nobody can stop you from thinking, even in times of adversity. It doesn't matter where you started or who your advisor is. Your ability to think critically is entirely your own asset, and nobody can take that away. Right? Many of the panelists today will talk about how to generate good ideas, and I will not add much to that. But one thing I will say is that good ideas are hard to come by. They're powerful yet free. You can think of good ideas anytime, anywhere, without or with connections or resources. And when you do that, remind yourself, though, don't compare yourself to others. Now, many of us, myself included, have this diehard habit of looking up somebody else's CV and just can't help comparing ourselves to other people. Yes, I can tell you life is unfair, and some people start ahead. But energy spent resenting that reality is energy not spent thinking or creating something new. So do a little bit of behavior correction when you find yourself slipping into that mindset. Now, that said, ideas are small and execution is big. A paper is a lot more than just a good ideas. When you just start out, right, when you work on your dissertations, you may come up with an idea, but the idea still needs refinement, it needs discussion, it needs feedback, and co-author projects are no different. Even the best ideas can fade without a capable team. That kind of brings me to another topic I want to touch on today, how to build a research network from zero. The most important tip about building a research network when you have none to start with is to seize opportunities when they arise. Like I mentioned, I spent most of my dissertation years in Detroit downtown doing tax returns during the day and running regressions at night. Okay. I didn't have seminars to go to, and I didn't have a lot of academic friends to talk to, but I did get lucky with my first paper. It got into a JFE. So one day, my co-authors and I got this random email from Alex Edmonds, and most of you guys do know him. Okay. So in the email, he said, your forthcoming paper is a lot related to my job market paper. I know it's probably too late to offer you comments now, but if you happen to be writing in the same area, I'll be happy to read it. I know Alex was probably just being polite, but I decided to take him up on that offer. A while later, I developed another idea in that same area. I wrote up a draft. It was hardly a draft. It's more like a summary of the idea and just one table summarizing sort of the core result. I wanted to reach out, but I hesitated. Alex was already a star, and I was, just starting out. One of the fellow assistant professors at Rutgers encouraged me to reach out, and I still remember what she said. She said, "What do you have to lose?" And I think she was right. So I reached out, and Alex read the draft, and he wrote back and said, "Are you going to be at the upcoming WFA meeting?" And that meeting was 3 days away, and I wasn't planning to go. But I replied, and I said, "Yes, I'll be there," and I went. So that meeting turned into a collaboration of 4 papers, over 15 years. And I learned so much. And that experience sort of completely shaped how I view, your approach to building a research network. Now, here are a few more tips I would like to share. First, don't be afraid to send papers for comments, but make sure that you do your homework first. Okay? Make sure that when you send a paper for comments, it aligns with that person's research interest, and preferably current interest, not interest from 30 years ago. Now, I discovered that people tend to be more generous when they see genuine curiosity and effort. Second, be ready with your elevator pitch, right? Highlight the idea clearly and explain why it matters. Now, I still remember approaching Jonathan Karpov about an idea on short selling and earnings management. It was, of course, right up his alley, but he was really busy at that time. So I tried politely and persistently, and after a couple of exchanges over several months, and John agreed to collaborate. And that project, turned into a Jeff paper, but it wasn't about the outcome, though. What I wanted to highlight is the clarity and persistence when you approach somebody with ideas of shared interest. Pique interest through your ideas, not your social skills. In my experience, people tend to remember thoughtful ideas a lot better than small talk at a conference. And hold on to your good co-authors, and I cannot emphasize this enough. When you find people who can make you better, right, pay close attention to how they write, how they think, how they give feedback. Learn by observing, right? Accept criticism with gratitude and curiosity, not defensiveness, and treat such co-authorship as opportunity to learn, not a shortcut to publication. Don't be short-sighted. You'll get a lot more out of the co-authorship down the road. And handle unproductive collaborations with your eyes on the prize. Now, not every project will go smoothly. Some don't. And in those situations, the best path forward sometimes is just to pick up a little bit more work yourself, push the paper forward, and move on. Now, academia is a repeated game, but it's not a marriage. Your marriage can fall apart. So you don't have to work with that person again, but get this one done first. And finally, working through co-authors remotely is not as hard as you may think. I still have co-authors on published papers who I have not met in person, and it worked out just fine. And this was before the Zoom became available. But do be organized and be detail-oriented, right? Make sure that you write detailed notes about your discussions and the plans forward. Finally, I will say that adversity doesn't disappear in academic career, unfortunately. It just changes shape. I personally have faced scrutiny at every stage of my career, sometimes publicly, sometimes privately, sometimes anonymously. Let's just say that I had a fair amount of discussions on EJMR, terrible website. It was unpleasant. But I realized that, partly thanks to my earlier experiences, that nobody can take away your ability to think, to write, and to create. What kept me grounded was focusing on the work itself and the people who supported it, like my co-authors, my colleagues, and family. And family is really important in this business. And the funny thing is that when you stop caring so much about how people perceive your setbacks, you actually free up so much time and energy for what it matters, better work. Okay. So today I share a little bit about my own career, not because it's exceptional. In fact, my CV is probably pretty ordinary compared to some of the panelists here. But I do think that it's full of the same ordinary challenges that many of you will face: uncertainty, rejection, isolation, and self-doubt. And looking back, I think that working through adversity, at least to me, comes down to the ability to think and the willingness to reach out. And when opportunities come, and I assure you that they will come, cherish them. Okay, and be kind, be polite, and treat every opportunity as if it matters, because it often does. That's all I have to say. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you. I'd like to correct one thing Vivian said, though. Really, her career was exceptional. Making it through Katrina, some of you probably even remember Katrina. It was a horrible disaster that hit our country, especially New Orleans, and it's just amazing what she did. And I'd like to echo one other thing, is when you're picking projects, again, when somebody approaches you or if you approach somebody else, the project is what really matters. Okay, it's not a social event. It's not like somebody invited you to dinner, so you have to invite them back. No, it's not like that at all. It's the project. You will write a certain number of papers in your career, and you want to make them all count. And so therefore, you really want to pick out your research program and think about what you want to do. And if it means working with somebody, that's great. And if there's somebody you really want to work with, but your research don't align, then go to dinner with them, but don't work on them. It's your human capital that you're trying to develop. Again, what you came to graduate school to do was to develop your human capital. And now, as you proceed to the next step, you really want to pick your projects carefully and work hard on it. Anyway, so any thoughts from the panel? Zahi, you're being quieter than usual. Yeah.
So, I think, well, I don't want to say the things I'm going to say, but it's like, it's one of these jobs that could not feel like a job. So I think if you are getting into this kind of stage where it's like, yeah, I'm actually waiting for Monday morning to come, or it's, I like to go to work. I mean, then I think it's good. Right? It's like I like to think about ideas. Or I like to. It's not like forced on you. So I think this is kind of a sign that you're in the right place. It's difficult to survive if you don't have this feeling. I think it's difficult to, because I think it's high pressure. It's really demanding. It's difficult to be creative forcefully, or to be to write and revise and revise and revise and revise and be in such a job that has so much rejections and everyone tells you that your paper is stupid and you didn't think about you didn't cite this guy, or it doesn't make sense. Or many of them are stupid. No, I'm talking about myself.
Anyone from the audience? I mean, you guys are saying.
Yeah. No, I'm just.
Oh, Mike. We're supposed to use mics. Yeah, we're supposed to use mics. Anyone? You guys? Come on. You're here. Yes, in the back. What's your name?
I'm shooting from Notre. My question is, I want to ask Professor Yuri's question is like, because we're talking about teaching, like when you hire new graduate, what's the question you're going to ask? And in terms of teaching, in other words, like what kind of what aspect of the teaching you rather than know when you hire a new graduate?
Well, it's the same story over and over. His head is on. The time of job market comes, and we have people that have been working in a couple places. People come, start presenting their research, and when you evaluate them for job, if your opinion matters at all, because it's a collective opinion, you first of all think about the research. I try to read through the job market paper, which my colleagues don't always do, but I try to read and think critically, like, is this some paper, like, again, is this going to change anything? Or are we just looking at some, are we doing it for the purpose of identification, or are we trying to identify some question? And then when a person presents, the part of presentation actually signals about teaching. And it works really well. So that's the answer to your question. You see a person presenting, and he or she gives a speech and answers the questions, and you pretty much know if it's going to be a good teacher or not. Now, is this crucial? No, but you want to have a person who's able to teach. So there should be some at least minimum requirement. So usually we never ask for like what your teaching ability. We never ask what your evaluations, what your grades were in graduate school. None of this matters. And since Mike was asking about the comments for Vivian presentation, I think that the thing that I took from the speech is that you have to do, no matter what adversity is, you have to do what you like. You have to do what you think is right. So like we had this discussion in breakfast, like every time students, for example, asking which, like now it was ESG, do you have to write about ESG? It depends. What if you feel like
AI and ESG.
Yeah, AI now. Do you have to write about AI just because AI is popular? I don't know. But what if you write something about AI and 2 years later and they start writing about something else? And it was blockchain just a couple of years ago. You write about something that you think has impact and is important. Because what I was in physics PhD and then I was in finance PhD. What struck me in finance PhD, honestly, what struck me is a lot of people do it because they think they must do it. They must write this paper because with this paper they get a job and with jobs they get money. Very often you start digging deeper like, okay, but why did you write? Well, because you told us to write the summer paper. You told us to write this, but no interest. So those things are the most dangerous. Just do something that you like. Okay, anyway, I'm done.
Could I jump in there too? So I'm at the University of Illinois, and we actually don't look at candidates' teaching experience or teaching portfolio. Partly the thinking is you're a high IQ, hardworking person. So maybe if you don't do asset pricing, you're not going to teach the PhD course in asset pricing or whatever, but you're a hardworking, high IQ person. You can learn to teach any undergraduate or master's course. So we don't really worry about teaching portfolio. But to echo what Yuri said, you know, your job markets, your teaching is really evaluated based on your job market seminar. If you give a really bad job market seminar, people are going to be sitting there in the back row of the seminar saying, we can't put her in front of a classroom. So the way, for I think a lot of schools, the way you prove your teaching ability is you do a good job in your job market presentation. Other than that, the only time teaching ability shows up is if maybe we need someone to teach private equity, which is pretty specialized. So someone like me, Zahi is not going to teach private equity, or there's sometimes, or maybe someone needs someone to teach a fintech course. So this is the time when your background comes up. But most of the time, you're a smart, hardworking person. You can learn to teach almost anything, and your teaching is really evaluated based on how well you do in your job market talk.
Yeah, just one thing to add on that. At some schools you'll go to, there will be like some associate dean who's a management professor who will show up at your seminar for simply saying, can this person teach our students? And basically, they'll just look at the presentation and use that information. Other questions? Yes, what's your name?
Hello, my name is Natasha Borik. I'm from the University of Michigan. My question is about co-authorship. Specifically, how do you find a co-author? Do you need to have an idea first and then reach out to the person? Or how does it happen for you?
You talked about that a little bit. Yeah.
I think it's a combination of both. When you come to a meeting like FMA, of course, the doctor consortium is really beneficial. But also, go to the sessions that really excite you, right? And where kind of the sessions align with your interests, and to see, who are actively working on the areas you're interested in, And some of my co-authors, of course, I mentioned 2 co-authors during my talk, but I also have a lot of junior co-authors I work, very well with. And I discover those co-authors when I go to meetings or just go to sessions. Obviously, when people's papers are included in those sessions, right, when they're doing presentations and discussions, and they have active interest in that particular topic, and, just approach them with talks. And even when you're a shy person, I'm pretty shy myself, right, focus on the topics. And once you start, picking people's interests and curiosity, and they will be happy to chat with you. I mean, it doesn't mean that every conversation will lead somewhere, but when you start those conversations, hopefully, some will manifest into collaborations.
Should I turn it on? Is it on? Yeah. All right. So I wanted to make 2 comments on this, and kind of, I guess, second, Vivian. So one is that I don't feel it is the profession for